It's updating. Right, it should be live, and I'll make sure the equipment tells me that we're good. It's yellow and it's now turned green, which means that we're fully synced on the
Okay.
stream. And it looks like we have a pretty good crowd already. But I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and then we can get into some of the goodness that I know folks have been looking forward to. The kind of opening introduction. I want to first come out and say I do own Ravencoin. This is not financial advice. However, I would say that this is good information that if you're interested in the space, you should absolutely listen to and hear and share and do all those wonderful things. But I do want to make sure there is disclosure. I do own Ravencoin, and I do mine Ravencoin on a regular basis, and am a participant in that space for full disclosure. And we will, yeah, everybody's saying that it looks good. You see and hear me? Well, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, Tron, for the folks that, I mean, I think everybody on this, at least watching this, probably knows who you are. I've watched some stuff, but I'll go ahead and let you kind of open it.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Tron Black. I was one of the kind of early developers of Ravencoin when it was part of Medici. I kind of worked with the team within Medici, and now I am part of the Ravencoin Foundation, which is a Wyoming organization created and founded in Wyoming in order to essentially help Ravencoin. It doesn't own Ravencoin. It isn't Ravencoin. It's just there to kind of assist and to be able to hold keys and things like that, so we can get mobile wallets in the stores and things like that.
Awesome. Let me get my. I was trying to make sure I wasn't having an echo there, but I think we're good. When I wear my headset when I'm doing interviews, sometimes I get that echo, but as long as everybody says it's cool, we'll continue here. So, I mean, the main part of this interview, I cannot believe after being part of this space, especially with Ravencoin, for essentially, I would say pretty close to the inception. I think my first video that I had made on helping people try to mine Ravencoin, which wasn't even a full rig at the time because a lot of the drivers and stuff weren't really set up for it yet, was the very end of January. I think it was like January 26th of 2018. So it was pretty early.
Yep.
On
that's the first
launch.
Month.
Yeah, I mean, it was within that same month. So, you know, just to try to get, you know, some exposure and let people know like why I was, you know, mining Ravencoin. And I had got to listen to, I call him Sir Patrick Byrne on at the Bitcoin conference down in Miami in 2018, and got to hear some of the, you know, just the basic background of where Ravencoin was coming from. I think a few weeks after that, he did a Business Insider video on it. And it just, you know, as an early person in Bitcoin mining and coming up through the space, my identification of like seeing where Ravencoin's, you know, ethos, as it were, it really attracted me to, you know, that open source nature, folks being a contributor. And part of this schedule today, we're going to go through and we're going to, you know, ping Tron where he can speak to when it comes to the innovation and some of the roadmap items for Ravencoin being very open source, and then also how developers that are out there that are maybe listening and watching this, like getting down kind of in the weeds, like how does, you know, an IDE, an integrated development environment work for somebody that's not into crypto. I have a lot of people reach out to me on just a development standpoint, and may have dabbled some with Solidity and Ethereum, but also want to look at what else is out there. And maybe we can dive into a little bit of that, give everybody kind of a basic agenda flow. But before that, we'll do some quick overviews of Ravencoin. I'll let Tron kind of handle that from like issuance, schedule, block times, coin supply, those sorts of things that people may not be tracking with Ravencoin in comparison to other coins. And then some of the development overview we'll go through and have some time. Where to go if you're an interested developer. Like how, you know, there's Discord, there's a few other options out there to be able to coordinate where does that kind of stuff occur. And then we'll get into some of the existential services that are available around Ravencoin when it comes to centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges, core functions with the asset creation when it comes to like the ERC20 like asset creation to make one-to-many tokens, and then the unique tokens, which are like the 721 equivalent to Ethereum's 721 unique token creation. Thereby you could create some NFTs. We can talk to that. some charts and telemetry. I know there's a few providers out there that have created really cool interfaces and displays and stuff to be able to see some chain telemetry. Block explorers, IPFS integration. There's a lot already on this. A lot of people just think it's a one-trick pony. The Ravencoin's a very diverse, coin, has a lot of different integrations already. And then we'll get into the deep dive on the development environment, which watching a lot of different stuff that you've done, Tron, and then some of the just my own edification of trying to understand where the development space is at, from a client standpoint, like how many, client team, is there a client team? Is that C++ only? Is it, is there Rust or, Python or any of those kind of clients? Is there for a Python developer out there, is that something maybe they can take on and start to build a client around it, that sort of thing. So we're going to try to get into a little bit of the development standpoint, because I know there's a lot of developers that follow the channel, and I want to make sure that they have an avenue to kind of where to go, kind of just lead them to water. I know a lot of that content's out there, and then I'll ultimately close out with probably the Ravencoin roadmap, kind of where things are at in your vision, Tron, of what you guys are working on, and then kind of what where some assistance could be had when it comes to maybe chain interoperability, stuff like with Cosmos, that sort of thing. If we're to start looking into the DeFi space with like wrapped Ravencoin, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of innovation as the world's kind of going to the DeFi kind of concept, how can Ravencoin be part of that? So that's the kind of agenda. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I recommend everybody sticking around here. And then I'm going to have a spot at the end. I know some people have been super chatting. I want to make sure I pay homage to that. All the super chats and stuff today, I'm going to convert all of that transition into Ravencoin, and we're going to donate that to the foundation today. So whatever the totality of that is, it's all going to be a Ravencoin donation. So know that you guys' funds are going to help the development of Ravencoin for that. So awesome. And we already had a couple out there. That's why I wanted to make sure that was mentioned early. But let's get in real quick, if we can, with just a quick overview from an aspect like the chain, a fork of Bitcoin, that sort of thing. Take probably a couple minutes and just kind of back brief folks of what Ravencoin is compared to other stuff out there.
Sure, absolutely. So Ravencoin was originally a code fork, not a chain fork of Bitcoin. It was forked probably around October of 2017, launched live on January 3rd, 2018, which was Bitcoin's 9th birthday. We have a Genesis block from the same publication that Bitcoin launched with that talks about Bitcoin. It just happened to be the same publication talked about Bitcoin on that day, which was amazing. So we launched with we have a block reward that is 5,000 Raven instead of 50 like the original Bitcoin, and we have blocks that are 10 times faster, right? So it runs on 1 minute block times, which puts it somewhere. And then we also increased the block size by 2x of Bitcoin. So we have 2 megabyte block size. We have 1 minute block time. So we're about 20x the capacity, right, of just transaction capacity of Bitcoin. I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin, by the way. I don't want any of this to sound like I'm ragging on Bitcoin. I'm a huge fan. But we use that. It's great source code. It was a great base. That launched, got traction pretty quick. You could mine it with a laptop originally. It wasn't, like a month or 2 or 7 weeks or something like that, where it was, became impractical on a laptop and became GPU mined. And then we tried to keep it that way. And then some ASICs came out. We had changed the algorithm to a kind of a chained algorithm. So it used 16 hashing algorithms chained together and with inverted order every block based on the block hash of the previous block. So it was kind of an innovation. So we did that for a while, and then an ASIC came out that was kind of able to handle that. So we tweaked it a little bit, added a few more hash things just to kind of obsolete those ASICs. Those they adapted. So we switched it to KAWPOW, which is a derivative of ProgPoW, which is derivative ETH hash. So it basically uses all of a GPU, it just kind of maxes it out. So if there is an ASIC, it's going to look a lot like a GPU with having to have memory and lots of parallel paths and whatnot, and with probably without the economics of scale for creation. So right now we know of no ASICs that it's GPU mined. We're very often the second most profitable to mine, right under Ethereum. We have been the most profitable at times, but right now usually we're number two, which will change, of course, when Ethereum kind of phases that out. Then we will good chance it will be number one at times. Then in November of 2018, we added the ability to create your own assets. So if you think of assets, if you're familiar with ERC20, we created kind of that ability. If you're familiar with ERC 721, which are used for NFTs, we created that ability. We created them. They're called unique assets. We also have sub assets, which is a little different. So anybody who has a root asset can create assets underneath that, which allows you to do almost like a domain name structure, where if you own the root domain, like if you owned, let's say, google.com, you could do like docs.google.com and sheets.google.com and mail.google, that kind of thing. You can do that same type of thing within the asset structure, and create, unique assets under that, which kind of allows you to do a multi-tiered thing where it's like the person that's running the business can have one and then issue things to artists. And then those artists can then create NFTs under that. So it allows kind of this multi-tiered structure. So all that's been created. We created after that in 2018, kind of right after 2019, right after the ICO thing, we created restricted assets, which always start with a $sign. And those allow some compliance things, the ability to freeze trading and things like that. You don't want to use them for crypto-like things, but for things that need to be compliant in kind of the STO space, they're useful. And so, that's kind of our set of kind of assets and tools that exist today.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, the one part that I like to, when people are asking me about different coins to mine and what makes up a good kind of ecosystem of a coin when it comes to mining, it really comes down to like the no pre-mine, no ICO. Like when you have a fair launch, meaning like you are it's an even kill for everybody. Now, granted, lots of mining comes to it. Difficulty goes up, so your yield goes down. But with Ravencoin's unique setup where it has 5,000 coins per block, which will have a little less than a year from now to 2,500 using the same principles of the deflationary inflation, aspect that like Bitcoin has, the yields right now are not too bad considering the amount of, mining that's out there. Is about 10x of what it was almost a year and a half ago, two years ago. In sheer size, still a lot of yield there for folks. And most recently I covered, because there's a lot of talk with like Ethereum going to proof of stake and what happens to all that potential hash power. That running those numbers, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at that model, but I was forecasting the delta between most GPUs and what, if a GPU does 30 mega hash on Ethereum, what's its like amount of hash power on, and it's different per GPU, but the main range is anywhere from 47 to 62% of the hash rate is the difference. So if there's 400 terahash on Ethereum, that's about 190, 180 terahash potential. If all that was all GPUs, we have a pretty good idea that it's not all GPUs on Ethereum. There's quite a few ASICs out there too. But if I took 70% of that and I moved that over to, Ravencoin as just an example, what would Ravencoin's price, have to be to absorb that? Because I look at the physical realities of here, and a lot of people don't like talking about price. I usually don't talk about price. I talk more about yield of a coin. But if it is, what is the measurement to give people an understanding? And the basic calculations there is if there's 70% of the hash power that makes up something as large as Ethereum was to move over to Ravencoin at a rough 60% of its hash rate, that's where we can get the calculations. It puts the break even for even the most basic GPU at about a 60-cent Ravencoin price, which is crazy to me that we're like 1/3 of the way there to where it could take on at least at a break even. And if Raven pushed as far as like $1.31, it actually is more profitable than the highest peak time of Ethereum because of the amount of yield, even with 70 plus terahash moving over, 70 to 120 terahash moving over. It's actually pretty amazing just that much of a flip. And a few people have put out some charts out there that's been interesting, showing the first 4 years of Bitcoin and its relative price versus the algebra of the difference of Ravencoin, being 5,000 coins versus 50, and where was Bitcoin's price at that. And if you do that inverse algebra, it's pretty scary. I'll make sure I post that chart after this of how close Raven is trailing Bitcoin on its first 3 years of performance. It's actually pretty crazy scary. And they were about a month of apart when you look at the 3 years of Bitcoin and you look at the bump that Raven did from the 1 cent to 20 cent just recently, of where Bitcoin actually went from like 78 cents to $11. They were within a month of each other. So it was like
Wow.
I don't know, like I'm not saying that old charts is indicative of what the future is, but if you chart that all the way up, it gets crazy. And not saying it would be 100%, but even if it's 10%, it's a pretty crazy figure of how just the dynamics of the deflationary model, to where it's not playing any kind of game theory games, like some of the other coins are doing. It's a known schedule. It happens every 4 years. We can see the emission rates. Yeah, it's a very interesting, dynamic when I start talking, fundamentals for, like, if you're going to mine it and you're going to hold the yield, right, type of thing. So there's a lot of content out there. That's just kind of a weird, shameless plug for previous content on Ravencoin. But the other part is the community-driven part, which will kind of lead us into the development efforts next section. So, like, and I'll let you get into this, Tron. The development efforts, which are held mainly on Discord, I believe, where you guys have the meetups and you have the discussion of what the roadmap is, and then kind of like, hey, we need this kind of help here. The open source discussion of that, the open participation to be part of those, where it's very transparent. You guys have audio made available on Discord. I'll let you kind of get into if there's a community member out there that's a developer that's maybe on the fence of trying to see which kind of effort they want to join on a team. Where could they go and do that? We'll kind of open up where it's at, and then we'll get into kind of some of the hows. Let you.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Love to talk about this right now. Actually, developers is one of our gating factors. We had developers when we were within Medici, and then we got transferred. Medici kind of helped create the foundation, and so funded it, not with a lot to hire full-time developers, but enough to create the structure and things like that, and help with the legal work so that we have this kind of legal foundation. The foundation is a 501c6, which means you can't, like a company could donate to it, I think, but individuals can donate, but it's not, you can't write it off your taxes, is my understanding. But we're basically taking these funds and then trying to deploy them to basically help Ravencoin. So we also have a couple of things. You can actually go to ravencoin.foundation/proposals, and that will take you to funded issues that we'll pay if you just build the PR for it, right? It fixes things that we know are issues. It basically takes a GitHub issue and then applies dollars to it, and it tells you how much, and you need to write unit tests and functional tests and things like that. But basically, you can get paid for just doing piecework, on that. So we have that, and then we also have a very generous community member that's looking to hire 2 full-time developers for Ravencoin. This would be outside the foundation. That would basically be monitoring, helping, building Ravencoin, all kinds of stuff. So it kind of depends on which developers we find, but we want a thin client wallet. So we want a wallet that you don't have to wait for it to sync. We have an SPV wallet, which is great because it only interacts with the network. So it's not dependent on anything. The only thing it's dependent on is getting a price of Raven, so it can tell you how much a Raven's worth. So if you say I want to pay $1, it knows. But other than that, it's just interacting with the network. We have that, but we want a thin client wallet. We need developers. I also have a list of other projects that are trying to integrate Raven in with their issuance platforms and things like that are also looking for developers. And so if your skill set is more like integration, that's, you mentioned like Python and things like that. It's great integration language to kind of talk RPC to Ravencoin core, and then be able to interact with the data feeds that come in from an issuance platform, for example. If you want to bridge those things, we have a couple of different options for people that need developers. I can make referrals and things like that. So if you want to get in contact with me, if you're a developer that wants to do that type of thing. So yeah, development's actually one of our gating factors. We have funds within the Ravencoin Foundation that have been donated that I'm trying to deploy to development, just to help on second tier core, mobile wallets, thin client wallets, and just fixing issues. So we've got funds to help with that.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I'm going to parse back through this video as we go through for the folks that are here in the discussion and hear some of the links and stuff. I'll make sure are part of this description. And I'll probably have a follow-up Medium article that we can link to, or a few of them that I know that Tron's already written to have, here's where you can go for some of these items if this, subject interests you. And there's one point that you said there that kind of made me kind of chuckle when you talk wallets and you talk integration and the dependencies. Like it brings me back. I keep bringing up Ethereum a lot because there's a lot of development on Ethereum, but like the tie to Infura and the risk with some of those wallets, like if those services go down and then the wallets lose some of their functionality, the ability to tie directly to the core and you start building dependency trees when you start having certain types of functionality, and it's good to understand the delineation of that. And that you can keep it kind of lean in the beginning here, but as more tech and more innovation comes to it, it may have a more adjustment, as more, are added onto the stack. I mean, I know Ravencoin as a core is a lot different than Ethereum's. Has an EVM. It's turning complete. There's a whole. It's a platform, but as we start to look at, if there are prospective Ethereum developers out there, anybody out there, don't be scared. Look at, how to come on and maybe have do some pull requests. For some of the folks that are not following, going out to like GitHub, you can actually go out there, and if you have some development experience, you can always do a pull request, and it might not get included, but you can make the effort and have discussions. If people are trying to coordinate that, if they read something, they're not really about trying to get on any calls, but want to have an interaction, there are contextual ways to talk to you and the development team, right? That's on Discord or any emails or any of that effect.
Yeah, so I mean, you can DM me on Twitter. You can email me at tron@ravencoin.foundation. We have a dev meeting in Discord. If you go to ravencoin.org, go to community, go to Discord. There's a Ravencoin community Discord. There's a development meetings channel. It's really only open from on Friday from about roughly 2 to 3 Mountain Time. So that's Utah time, at 4 p.m. Eastern. And we just, developers are in there. We kind of talk about issues and things like that. It's not just development. It kind of extends into kind of roadmap, where we're going, things like that, things that are needed. And then we've been holding shortly thereafter, a lot of times AMAs. We have a Ravencoin campus. It's also called Braveland right now. It's kind of being rebranded, but it's an entire virtual environment that was created for us by Blockchain Tiger and donated to the foundation. And it's this virtual environment. You run around. I mean, you can jump in a boat and drive around. There's office buildings and there's all kinds of stuff, right? And team meeting rooms, and there's a concert hall and an art hall, and it's pretty immersive, but it's also a great place to meet people. It's really for Ravencoin, so you'll meet people from around the world in that environment. You can talk to them about it, and it's kind of a neat place, and it's growing pretty quick. So we'll hold stuff in there. We've been holding AMAs in Spatial in VR, but you can also join via mobile phone or via desktop, kind of in a Zoom type environment. So those are kind of the things that, so that Friday is really a lot of where we kind of like figure out stuff and where we're going next.
Awesome. And so is that like do you guys have like a virtual Combine board, or, like on your, just the organization of like the roadmap and stuff? I mean,
yeah.
is that done like
so I would
kind of
say,
an agile principle?
Yeah, so it's done in multiple places, and part of that is that Ravencoin's not very centralized, right? So if you go to Raven project, there's that's where core is on GitHub. There's also a Ravencoin Foundation GitHub and some secondary tools and things like that, and things that I'm starting to build for NFT artwork and things like that are there. There's also a raven.wiki that basically branches you out to lots of places. The footer on ravencoin.foundation is just a branch. I mean, it's just branches out to everywhere. I mean, to other third-party wallets, to development resources, to the wiki, to the Discord, to Telegram, I mean, it's just kind of all over. And I'm very resistant to centralizing anything. The index I've centralized, right? The place where you can come to branch out, but I'm very resistant to centralizing everything, because then it's kind of dependent on a few people or foundation or gatekeepers. And this project is much larger than the foundation, much larger than me. It's just anybody can contribute. There's other people have made a marketing dev kit on GitHub where it's got all the graphics in different formats that anybody can use. It's all MIT licensed. People have made T-shirts and things like that from the graphics. It's able to grow much faster than kind of a single company would be able to even keep track of.
Absolutely. It's more for like with all the scams and stuff that are out there, more of a like where the central, or at least an area where they know they could start branching to get some of that information and not be astray. As you know, Ravencoin and some of the other coins have gotten more popular, more kind of static, non-trusted sites and just bad repositories, that sort of thing. It's a good center point. But yeah, to your point, having those various teams, and I think it's actually, this is leading us in a pretty good workflow of our current agenda here, where it comes into like the different kind of quote unquote client teams, like there's the core kind of iterations against the main Ravencoin core node and that. But like, has there been other discussions about it, like entire other like client teams, or is there a need for that, or is it more around just the integrations of like some of the other feature sets that could be maybe existential? I mean, there's DEX integrations. I've seen a lot of effort, especially on the collaborative nature that comes with trying to set up the centralized exchanges. And is it true? I think it's true that Ravencoin hasn't paid for any like centralized exchange participation, right?
That is true.
Yeah, I mean that's a big statement right there. I mean that the centralized exchanges see and include, like we could put out there and make sure folks, various people can take the ownership of trying to work the language or work some, support from a development standpoint to answer questions. But by and large, I mean, a lot of this has been just the centralized exchanges, which are notorious for charging to have your token listed, listing Ravencoin, decentralized exchanges. Almost every day I'm tagged on something that's this new exchange that's had listed it, which gives, people are like, why does that matter? It matters because it's a liquidity center. And if somebody that doesn't normally participate on the network, but they may use that one decentralized exchange, it now gives them access to the asset. And to start to discover and maybe use it, and not just a way to hodl or buy something. It's all about engagement and ability to get out there. But centralized exchanges, the charts and the chain telemetry. I've had a few people after setting this interview up, like our fireside chat as it were, because I think I'm talking just as much as you. Folks that have highlighted some of the stuff that they've built, and they've sent saying, hey, we build charting for this and different views on the data. So there is a lot of existential collaboration and organization, but still doing it in their own, their way to be a contributor, right? A blockchain explorers is a good example. And then, it was going to lead into my next kind of thing. We haven't talked about the IPFS integration, which I think is one of the cool highlights of what Ravencoin has kind of as an integrated feature in there, to where you can actually, in part of the transaction, in part of the core wallet, you can actually write your you know, your URL out there with what you're posting to IPFS and upload, you know, content. I've shamelessly plugged a feature that I had done with a boring not a flamethrower out there, to where you could start to register your asset and add pictures to it and all that kind of thing. But like IPFS integration, just a quick briefing for people that don't really understand that, you know, that it's part of that. And is there any other adjustments or changes coming to IPFS with Ravencoin?
There's a few things on the client side. Most of it's already in core. Let me throw out one thing really quick on the decentralized thing. Because we're so decentralized, you will see more scams attempted, and some that have been, you know, that we've shut down or whatever. But there's been attempts because there isn't a central thing. So just because we have a lot of people on this audience, I want to please be really, really careful not to fall for these. I have a good friend that lost some in falling for a scam, which is kind of run as a contest kind of thing. And so it was really frustrating. But we don't have the ability or resources to kind of stop everything, but just be really careful of where you're getting your information. So ravencoin.org, good place to start and branch out, and ravencoin.foundation, good place to start and branch out. Most of the sites that those link to will be vetted. But don't watch, you know, for new domains, because they'll register Ravencoin something or other and pretend to be official and potential scam. So just don't send your coins to just anybody, right? I mean, if the contests, things like that are fake, be really careful where you download the core wallet, right? Because if you have your funds in the wallet and you download something, it's just really dangerous. So I just want to put that warning out there to as many people as possible. I'll post it every once in a while in Discord and Telegram or whatever, but I just want to make sure everybody sees that. It's one of the very few downsides that we have to decentralize. Decentralized is awesome. It can grow faster, et cetera, but that's one of the few downsides is it's not under control that way. So I'm going to say that. Back to IPFS. One of the things that when we originally created Ravencoin, I had worked on counterparty open assets and things like that, and they used Bitly links that were embedded in the Bitcoin blockchain to say, hey, what is this token about? What does it represent? Well, I helped build an explorer for that, and most of those Bitly links were gone, right? So you go to download that, and it's supposed to download a little JSON file, and they're just all gone. The websites are gone, so you don't know what that token was even representing or what it was about. And so when it came time to do Ravencoin, we said, all right, let's do IPFS, because even if one person, anybody kind of held that file, they could throw it back into IPFS, get the same hash and get the same file. And so anybody could like collect them all and put them all back in or pin them. It's just a way to make sure that the file and the reference to the file are the same thing. It also had just an amazing effect, right? It actually worked out better than we expected using it for metadata. And so along the way, we extended it. So now built into the base protocol, for any transaction, you can include an IPFS hash. And so you can having trouble hearing you. You can use that for things like really anything, like an invoice that you wanted to send with it. You could use it for pictures. You could use it for cost basis. You could use it for really anything, right? You can put anything you want there. You can put a movie with every transaction that you send, and that doesn't get stored on chain. Just the nature of it. It gets stored in IPFS, or doesn't really get IPFS, for people who don't know, is interplanetary file system. It's a way to, it doesn't really store your file. Somebody has to store it or pin it, but it's a way to locate the file by its content, right? So you throw a file in, it gives you back a content identifier, which is just a hash, and that becomes the name of the file. And then you can find that file later, as long as anyone, yourself or someone else, has basically kind of kept that file. Then it kind of routes through DHT and hash table kind of thing, finds the file, and then kind of reassembles it and brings it back. It's really amazing technology. The fact that you take that content identifier and that does go on chain, so that is immutable, then that hash that you've attached to your token is immutable. And because that content is now also immutable, or if it's gone, at least you're not going to get something different back, right? If you ask for that back, you're not going to get like a changed PDF or a modified something. So you can't be tricked, right? Like, oh yeah, like a Bitly link, they could change the content, but because the IPFS content identifier is the both the hash and the name, you can't change the content and trick somebody like, oh, I promised you this with this token, and then I tweaked it to something else, and now you've got this different metadata. So anyway, it works out really, really well with blockchains. It's just a perfect partner, and we've extended that to now all the way to transactions. So every transaction. So
Yeah, that's actually a really great explanation, because I think people kind of miss, when you're thinking development, you're thinking of where to stage kind of your transactional platform. Like if you were to choose Ravencoin, having that already kind of integrated as part of its operation, it just in a simple way. I mean, like it was not that complex to create even the workflow, which I was really kind of just doing a co-location of a supply chain exercise, right? Where I've quote unquote validated an asset through a few means, meaning they would have to send me a picture. We would have with the asset, I had a few ways to do that with being remote. Then I could co-locate that on chain through a transaction. And now you have this chain of custody that you've effectively set up, right? And I mean, like, important documents or something that has PII or personally identified information, probably not. But you could have redacted PII on like an invoice, and the thing that you care about is the invoice number and the action that or the content on there, with redaction of the personal information. And you could still do a lot of the chain of custody stuff that you would have on any kind of supply chain. So using that as like the transaction mechanism, and then the co-linking with ability to post files, really I think puts it to an advantage. And it's still, I mean, again, this is going to be kind of, I don't call it ETH fashion, but the cost of fees is still far, far less. Now, all fees, and I'll talk briefly about that. I mean, fees all come down to transactional use. If there was a 100x, 200x plus push on volume on something like Raven, we would, all chains that are decentralized have this balancing act when it comes to transactional volume, right? So like if there's extreme amounts of volume, there's going to be fees with that. And if the token is rising with cost too, you have this kind of compounding effect, which has happened to a couple fee situations with like, Ethereum and Bitcoin when you have an extreme amount of volume. But you do have some throughput advantage with, as you had mentioned before, with the block size being a little increased, and then two factored, and then the block timing being a lot shorter, because now you can get a lot more transaction volume through. So it is there is some good trade-off there to be as I call it, a participant in the ecosystem, providing services and value at where it makes economic sense. And I've been trying to go onto that of like, everybody's trying to put everything on Ethereum. Like, hey, like having some diversity here and starting to use some of these chains, since a lot of the baseline code and architecture, UTXO stuff with Ravencoin and Bitcoin, and then other things that are on smart contract platforms, having some of that diversity across chain, I think gives you, one, the fidelity of having like a multiple data center kind of concept. And then you also have, a spreading out of that activity to reduce your fee cost. And I think that's going to be kind of the next trigger. Honestly, I mean, it's looking downstream and the effects of that as more stuff starts to come platform onto some of these decentralized, chains, of looking at that cost factor when it comes to transaction fee stuff, and then understanding those base properties, that each chain provides, and then having, a code base that's coming from, Bitcoin, which has been, there's every incentive in the world to try to take on or challenge it, right? And it's pretty rock solid. So I think it gives Raven a pretty solid base to work from in there. Let's transition to the kind of I have a deeper dive on a development environment. So this is one more step down, and this is because there's a lot of things that we talk about and say, hey, we need developers. Where do we go to come on board? But let's say a developer's listening to this right now, and he's like, you know what, today I want to start playing with it. IDE setup, like, so if you have a traditional developer, maybe full stack developer, Node, React, kind of the current new hotness, Angular, how do they go out and set their environment up? Is there any kind of major changes? Is there a guide right now for, like, if you just wanted to start, doing a pull request and starting to work with the stuff? Is there any kind of thing to set up that
Yep.
development environment?
Okay,
out there.
let me say two things. I'm going to jump back real quick, rewind just a little bit on the IPFS thing, because you mentioned that you wouldn't want to put PII and things like that. There is a what's called RIP, Raven Improvement Proposal number 11, which does encryption. So it's a way to publish on-chain public GPG keys for your user, and then encrypt with that so that only certain people can see the data. So the data would be available, and only they would be able to decrypt it with the private key, the GPG key
Awesome.
of that user. So anyway, that's out there. It's being used mostly by Mango Farms wallet. So it's a wallet, a web-based wallet that does that signs client side. So you keep your keys. But you can look at that wallet, and it supports assets, asset creation, encryption, and things like that. Okay, so for development, so there's lots of different areas of development. So there's core, right? So Ravencoin core, and we do have some issues that are funded for core. Most of them right now are not consensus level changes, meaning they're not changing the rules at all, which means that people who aren't like super technical can go ahead and kind of take these on because they won't affect the way the chain validates rules and things like that. Some of them are Qt based, so the user interface, just improving that. So for a development environment, you can do it via like CLion, for example, on Mac or on Linux. You can put in, I think it's GDB, and kind of link GDB up to CLion for debugging. And that's probably the recommended. If you just want to kind of build from source, there's instructions right in the, if you go to, I believe it's, I want to make sure I get it right. So Raven project, and then, let me make sure.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, Raven project / Ravencoin. Just make sure you go there and you can get the code. There's build instructions for Linux, and it's like 4 or 5 lines, kind of standard thing, and some dependencies you have to add. So you can build that yourself, and then if you want to actually work on it, I would recommend. A lot of people have their own favorite browser and stuff, so you can probably integrate it with just about anything. But CLion, you can do that if you want interactive debugging. You can kind of wire it up that way. As far as people who have other skill sets, kind of beyond that, so Python or JavaScript, Node, things like that. You can interact with core, uses RPC, and so you can interact with, and there's in the assets folder, there's in core, there's some Python that you can use that will roll through every transaction, or roll through every block, roll through every transaction, in a place where it kind of commented and say, if you want to check stuff, put it in here. You can just kind of plug in your Python. That way it's kind of the framework for just walking through the chain. And so if you wanted to, as an example, walk through the chain for every block, every transaction, and look at something, you could just plug in your part right there and look at each thing, count stuff up, or count how many addresses there are, something like that. That code framework is there that you can use. There's also a code framework that once it gets finished that, it kicks into, there's a way to get posted for when new blocks come in. So it uses zero message queue. And so it can actually kind of come back and post to your message queue that's running in Python. And so you're not polling, you're actually getting pushed. So you're just waiting for a block, brings in a block, you query the block, query the transactions, you can run through it that way. So it kind of switches from a run through all of them to getting notified. And so that framework is there as well. You can write with anything. I mean, Java, Kotlin, Node, any of them will talk RPC, which is basically kind of a glorified post call, right? It calls the function with its parameters. So you can basically query it with any language. And so whatever you want to write with, you can do that. And then all the RPC calls that were in Bitcoin are still there. Get blockchain info and transfer and all these functions all exist. But there's a whole new set, right, for assets, for issuing assets, for transferring assets, from one address to another, for setting fees, getting fees, all those kind of things. All of those functions are there. If you just call Raven-CLI help, it'll give you a huge list, and they're categorized by assets, restricted assets, and things like that. So just a whole new set of RPC calls. So yeah, that's a way where Raven D becomes the core, right? The API center of the thing, and then you can ask it if you want to go up one level from that. There's a Insight Explorer that you can download and kind of assemble, and it's using Raven D at its center, but it's providing just a get, just a API calls to say, get balance and things like that, just regular, API calls. So you can use that. I think Blockbook, also, we have one based on Blockbook, does the same thing, kind of builds a database and you can query the Blockbook API. So a lot of wallets use that, say get balance, and then they have their own keys and sign transactions and things like that. So a lot of the stuff, because Raven is Bitcoin compatible, if you find other tools that work with Bitcoin, those will work with Raven, RVN, the token. They may not work with assets. You may have to extend them, but they'll work, by changing basically, 5 parameters. I mean, you change the network ID, the port, the first byte. There's like 5 parameters that you change, and then it acts like Bitcoin as far as it's transferring Raven RVN.
Awesome. Yeah. And for the folks that are kind of semi-tracking that are not developers, if you have the Ravencoin core wallet and you go into like the console area, you can get a lot of those commands that we're talking about right now just in there, just doing like a help. I think it's maybe a exclamation point help or something, and it'll show you all those get coin.
Yeah, in the console you can just type help and it'll just give you the list.
There it is. Yeah. Yeah, that'll give you the list of a lot of the commands that are out there, and it's got like on other tokens and stuff. Whenever I've seen that they've tried to do something, I usually go into their core and look like, what else did you add? Kind of do a diff on the difference on that to see if there's something kind of weird about it. No, that's awesome. Because that's one of the questions, like, how do I interact with this? Do I have to set up a special development environment? Are there, unit tests already out there that I can run? Can I tie it into Jenkins? All that kind of stuff as part of that. And I was thinking about doing a video guide series on that's just kind of separate from like a cradle to grave for just like, like developers are pretty smart dudes and usually can kind of figure it out, but there's nothing like getting lead to water on some of this stuff, right? I mean, we go to the guides, we can have infinite amounts of knowledge because we can go to Google and search it, right? So, but trying to get that as a one-stop shop of like, here's start to finish, here's how you do the pull request, that kind of stuff. I've looked to see a pretty good advantage of, helping people get started and take that kind of first discovery. It's like doing a lot of stuff for the DoD stuff that I do. Like, it's like the reason why they give them their first 10 missions, right? When they go to the red flag and stuff, you get that kind of, you understand the platform, you understand what's going on, and now you feel a lot more comfortable with whatever you need to go do on mission. Same kind of thing in the developer world, like running teams, like first few weeks, kind of getting everybody set up, and it's like, let's just go through it. Do you understand how Jenkins works? Do you understand where you put your unit test? Here's the testers, like, and get everybody on the same page and the cadence. So like having some of those things in play where teams that are used to working in a centralized way, how do they work in a decentralized way, and still are able to be effective? And I've found that just by providing sometimes YouTube videos, it sometimes gets them there, the rest of the way there. But getting into, like, as we start to kind of wrap up this thing, and I want to have some time there's been quite a few donations. I want to make sure I cover those to show kind of what's coming to the foundation's way. The future state. There's a few things that I know that are kind of on the precipice, as it were, when it comes to like interoperability. I did put a few things in there if we could talk about, is there any kind of plan, or is there a team that we'd be looking for to try to help with this, to start to try to move to like a ABCI for like Cosmos, which is the application blockchain interface, essentially to kind of bind networks, Chainlink Bridge, Uniswap Bridge, any of those kind of efforts afoot, or do you know of any that are kind of people are trying to build?
There are. So in fact, more so this, I would say, in the last 2 months, people have contacted me. So OpenDAO is looking at basically bridging Raven over to the Ethereum network. so that they can build their smart contracts to allow you to borrow against Raven and create algorithmic stablecoin. So that's what they do, is they create the algorithmic stablecoins, which basically, if you're not familiar with it, you can borrow against value, which in this case would be Raven, but it'd be over collateralized. And as it gets closer, you have to, so you're paying interest, but as you get closer to the value of your stablecoin, if it gets too close, you have the option of either adding collateral. If it gets too close and you don't pay attention to that, other people, there's a switch that flips, and other bots or whatever can basically pay off your loan and take your Raven at a slight discount. And so that's kind of how these stable coins work. So they're basically building that. There's other projects that have talked to me about putting Raven onto other chains, building. There's one I'm talking to right now about putting a stable coin directly native on Ravencoin. Also, we're looking at Raven. Now, we don't have, Foundation doesn't have a team of people, like a team of developers. What we're doing is basically supporting financially through the donations, and also routing people that have the right skill set to the right people that do need the work, or that are willing to pay full-time people. I mean, full-time, there's full-time jobs available. They just won't be with the Ravencoin Foundation. And so, if you're looking to get into that and you have those skill sets, talk to me and I can make the introductions. But yeah, there's quite a few kind of pushes to kind of get Raven onto other chains. I've had conversations recently within the last 2 weeks with the RSK team. So they would be able to bridge using KAWPOW, move Raven over to RSK. So that's how Bitcoin gets onto RSK, is through KAWPOW. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then that's different from KAWPOW, different from the mining. But that's a smart contract that's EVM based, that's basically merged mined with Bitcoin. So it is a smart contract chain. And so that would allow building, so other contracts like Uniswap and things like that should be able to move onto RSK, and then you'd be able to do those types of things with Raven by moving Raven over onto that. And then Ren is another way to algorithmically move native coins onto smart contract chains. So that's another one that we're looking at, but don't have development resources for, but would be happy to help fund if someone has that skill set, right, to do that.
Yeah, no, that's actually really good information, because I mean, a lot of, with the different liquidity pools that are out there, and then just the automatic market makers, the AMA or AMMs, and just, that bot infrastructure now that is in place to ensure, locking in stable coins and making sure that that's algorithmically sound, and, just to be able to play and be a participant in that, I think it gains additional exposure to, Ravencoin as a chain itself, and, gets, possibly more innovation, and development now that it could be part of that ecosystem. So it's interesting and good to hear. I mean, I tried to do a little bit of research. I mean, I try to keep up with a lot of different things, but like the chain interoperability right now, some of those discussions did look like they were, parsing through Discord and just seeing some of the feedback that looks like it's moving, but it's good information, I think, for the community to hear. I'm going to start to kind of close it out with just the known roadmap right now. So is there, we were talking about some of the stuff that you guys are looking right now, bug fixes. Is there any new releases coming up? Is it just gonna be like a normal, not hard fork release, but any big things coming up?
So there's only one big one that we're planning on for consensus, and that's pay to script hash being supported for Raven assets. So the code's been written because we did a big audit. We want to make sure that this also gets a security audit. So we're in the process of getting that set up. Once that's audited and whatever, then it'll have to activate similar to, with BIP9 activation, so many miners accepting it and things like that. But that allows you, the pay to script hash lets you do multi-sig on assets and things like that. So once you have that ability, then it's easier for custodians to be able to build to do custody for assets. Right now, you have multi-sig for Raven just because Bitcoin had it, and pay to script hash for Raven because Bitcoin had it. We just didn't have it for assets, and so that's kind of the big one right now.
Yeah, that's actually a real big deal, especially any institutions wanting to use the STO features, right? I mean, that now they would have the ability to, if they issued out stuff, have multi-signatures, multiple parties, and there's a lot into the institution side when it comes to the people that handle the money versus accounting and all those other things are multiple people. Legally they have to have multiple people. It has their separation of duties and all that kind of stuff is the rationales for that. So I'm going to take a quick, right now it says 575 people watching right now. Wow. We've had several donations. I want to kind of go through some of those just quickly. We do thank everybody for doing that. Anybody that caught in late, all the donations today that came through are being donated to the Ravencoin Foundation. So I'm going to sum all those up and then make that donation. That's in help Tron and team that are helping to guide the developers in the different areas that are looked for, help fund some of that development that's out there.
Also, if you want to know where the funds are going, we have probably the most transparent accounting. We have a bank account that's separate, and then we have kind of crypto accounting, and it's all available at ravencoin.foundation/accounting. And it's basically a Google spreadsheet view only, but it gets updated, and it has API links to basically the price of things and stuff like that. So
that's awesome.
Very, very transparent accounting. You see where everything goes.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that we had. Let me go all the way back up to the top here. We had quite a few donations here. So we've had about $350 worth of donations today on this. That's going to go there. B-Tech with 100 spot, James Davies with 100 spot for about getting more developers. Seems to be a lot of folks, liking the idea of being able to contribute, if they're not coders, but being able to contribute financially to help some of those efforts out there. Again, most of this discussion, all the discussion is going to be gone through, and then anybody that's looking for any particular links that we're talking about, I'm going to make sure that's in the description. This was actually very informative for me, especially on the interoperability side, and then some of the features when it came to the restricted assets. I know of them. I just haven't done a lot of research on the STO side, so it's interesting to hear some of that. I think the IPFS discussion was really good too for folks that weren't tracking the IPFS discussion. I'll see if we got a few minutes for a few questions because we got about 3 minutes. If anybody wants to ask a question. None of the donations, I looked at the donations, none of them had questions. So they were all just donations. Usually,
well, thank you for the donations,
trying to
everyone.
get their message heard. So we'll see if we can get somebody if they want to ask a question. Otherwise, we can wrap it up. I mean, this is our first time actually physically talking. I mean, we've talked to each other on chat every once in a while, but I'm surprised it's taken 2 and almost 3 years. It's 3 years now to have a discussion at some point. It's just a lot of praise right now for the efforts and stuff that you guys are yourself and the foundation's doing right now to keep things moving. I think there was some concern whenever there was that kind of Medici kind of stepped away, and then the foundation's formed. It's like anytime there's transition, it gets to like where things are going to go. But I think if anything, the indicative of what's right now price wise, and you're seeing the movement, you're seeing the hash rate grow in Ethereum. Or from Ethereum over to Ravencoin, it's really growing. I think that shows health on a network. People believe and trust in it. And while hash rate doesn't dictate, the performance and any of that, it does show the kind of front running of the potential of a network. I think it's good to bootstrap early on that, and I think it's proven pretty successful for Raven so far. A lot of people are asking when's Coinbase, so I'll let you speak to it. I know that it's been submitted, but I'll let you.
So I don't have any more information than you guys do. I mean, I was the one that submitted the application, kind of, for the foundation, and it went really well. A lot of the questions were related to what you would expect, which is did you raise money before? How, these tokens, basically, are these tokens a security? And the nice part is the answer for Raven is no, we didn't raise any money. We didn't we didn't sell tokens. They were all just mined into existence, et cetera. Just call up Coinbase. Let Brian Armstrong know that you're waiting for it, and
get Brian on the phone. Get him on Twitter.
Get him on the phone. It's funny story. I went to one of the early meetups, and this was in San Jose in like 2013, and Brian Armstrong was by his little 2x6 table. It says little sign, it says Coinbase above it. And I chatted with him. I mean, it's like it's a different world now. I mean, he's very wealthy, very successful. But I mean, it was this room was just this tiny, lunchroom size thing with pretty much all the crypto vendors, and just this little 2x6 table, and that was it. And so
those early days are great. I have that funny story like that with P. Marca. That with Anderson Howard. So he was at University of Illinois when I was in high school, a sophomore in high school. And we went up there for the release party of Mosaic. So Mosaic was like the underlying foundation for Internet Explorer. And I went up there as part of that. I was the president of the computer club and technology committee at my high school. And we went up there and we're sitting in this room, this like circle room up at University of Illinois. And they had like network solutions and Netscape and real audio and all these things. And this is like 1994. And like the owner and operator Anderson Howitz, Marco, was up there, and he was like I think he was a junior in college then, maybe going into his senior year. And he was part of that original engineering team on Mosaic, and he now runs a very successful, I think A16Z, I think is their fund, their venture capitalist fund thing. It's a multi-billion-dollar venture capitalist. But like I pinged him on Twitter about 2 years ago, and I said, hey, because he'd opened up his DMs. I said, hey, you're probably not going to see this because you're a very important, very wealthy person. But I was the young pimply kid that talked to you about the future of the internet before the internet was really a thing in 1994. But I was too young to really get into anything. You were coming out of college, so you were coming out hot off the heels of it. And I'm like, so it looks like it worked out pretty well for you. And like he responded back to me, and he's like, oh my dude, I totally remember that conversation. And he's like, so how are you doing? And it's like, it's just hilarious that like when you see before the success, or before the big thing, that everybody starts the kind of the same. You're working on an innovation, you're working on this future of what something could be. It's going to take a collaboration of people to do it, but like if you have that vision and you kind of be a leader in that space, that good things can come sometimes if you put enough tenacity behind it and stuff. And yeah, it was an interesting just reflection of something that I mean, just seeing those tables, like real audio, like I was trying to remember, like was Mark Cuban there at the time, because he probably was, but I don't remember ever meeting with him or anything. But like it was that 1994 before he sold real audio, so he probably was there too at that release party. But yeah, it's an interesting world, man, like going through this. But yeah, I think it's been good. We're right at a little over an hour. I had a good time. Hopefully people like the engagement and the conversation. I'll make sure all the links are below for everybody, and we'll post transactionally when that's sent over to the foundation, so people can track that, and we'll include that as part of the detail here. But I don't know if you have any parting words that you want to say, Tron, before we wrap her up.
Well, I want to say thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for the donations. It's very, very generous. Those will show up under the accounting, under the foundation. You can see where they go. So
awesome. And thanks guys for stopping by and checking it out. And we'll make sure that we this isn't our only time. So as maybe another update comes out and stuff, we'll recapture kind of where things are. If there's if it gets on Coinbase, one of these things, I have no doubt that it probably eventually will. I mean, Coinbase has been listing things, and I think Ravencoin meets all those those requirements. So it's just a matter of time of if, not when, or, it's a matter of when, not if. I think it will get out there. But thanks everybody for, watching. I think we peaked at 600 people. That's awesome. Awesome exposure for Ravencoin.